Well, hey guys, welcome back to We Got Balls. And today we're still doing the science of masturbation. We're talking about the sensation gap. So, Scott, when we're thinking about why choking your chicken, why spanking the monkey, why rubbing one out actually might be harmful for you if maybe you squeeze it a little too tight.
You use the words choke, spank, rub. Let's talk about that today.
Let's do it, guys. Stick around. There's more on the way back.
Welcome to We Got Balls, real, raw, masculine sex talk with Chris Inman and Scott Cohn. Here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to We Got Balls. And today we're talking about the sensation gap in the science of masturbation. Everybody does it, but the reality is, and you know this more than I do, Scott, is that there's a way that we train our penis when we masturbate, and we train it to be accustomed to our hand. Now, I don't know about you, but my hand, pretty strong. I got a pretty good grip strength. What's your grip strength these days?
Yeah, I can probably squeeze a nice tube around.
That's right. So, and that's how, when you're masturbating a lot, you get comfortable, you get accustomed to the feeling of your penis and your hand. And obviously when you go to have partnered sex and you have a lot of different dynamics with that, a vagina or even an anus, if that's your flavor, doesn't have the same level of constriction that a hand might have.
That is correct.
And so therein lies our problem, right? So how do we want to address it? I know what might be helpful for some of the guys is to kind of give a better understanding about the physiology of the penis, how the penis really functions, so that we can just educate ourselves a little bit about why that constriction is so harmful. Tell us a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, so I'll jump into penis anatomy here in a second. I just want to remind everybody, this is part 4 of a 5-part series on the science of masturbation. We use this framework that I developed early on in my raising kids phase with my sons in particular as they were entering puberty. So we talk about the arousal gap, the duration gap, the frequency gap. Today is the sensation gap, and we're going to finish up with the connection gap, which is kind of
now,
what
today we're doing the sensation gap. Maybe another time we'll do the connection gap. So, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so much.
Let's start with the penis anatomy. So, just a shout out to all the uncut guys in the audience, because we get a lot of questions about, are you going to do an episode on circumcision and uncircumcision? And yeah, we have that on the roster, and that's a topic that a lot of men want to talk about. So
have you heard about the guy who never realized he was not circumcised until he was like in his old age?
Yeah, that's Captain Picard.
Captain Picard. Patrick Stewart realized, he was told by, I think, his third wife, you're not circumcised. But yeah, it's good to know.
What? I thought I was. That's a funny video clip on the internet for anybody who's a Star Trek fan. But yeah, it's one of those things that I've been surprised by in my own story, because although I was circumcised and my brother was circumcised, my dad was not. And I did not know that until he told me last Christmas, as we were talking about my son did not have his baby boy circumcised. And we started talking about circumcision, uncircumcision. My dad goes, well, I'm not circumcised. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How in the world? Why did you put us through that torture? So, for me as a circumcised guy, my curiosity is always peaked around, I wonder what it does feel like to have a foreskin. And of course, like when you have foreskin, it's kind of a built-in masturbation sleeve. That's how most guys who are uncircumcised and start masturbating discover the pleasure of their penis, is by, when you get erect, your foreskin retracts a little bit and you notice you can slide that up and down on the glands. And so that's the first part of the anatomy to talk about, is the glans penis, which is the top of your penis.
Top of your penis, glans penis. What is that? Why is that so significant in a man's sensation?
Because there are about 8,000 nerve endings in the glans penis, and it is the particular area to stimulate on a man if you're going to do manual stimulation that will trigger the erection reflex in your spinal cord. So the way there are 2 ways to get, there's 3 ways to get erections. There's thinking about sexually arousing material. So you can get an erection by thinking about something arousing. You can get an erection inadvertently if you're riding in the car and, the vibration of the car, or there's, a dog or a kid is wiggling around on your lap or whatever. There's lots of reasons that you can generate that erection reflex spontaneously, usually because the glands is being rubbed in whatever fashion unintentional. Like wrestlers, for example, will get erections when wrestling, jiu-jitsu guys, because there's a lot of friction on the penis in that kind of close body to body contact. So it's all unintentional. It's that sexual incongruence that we've talked about before, that men can be sexually aroused without having sexual desire about 50% of the time. And then the direct method is direct stimulation of the glans penis, because it triggers those nerve endings and it sends signals then to the spinal cord, which generates the erection reflex. And that is a reflex in the body. So those are the three kind of methods of how erections occur. But comparing the glands to the clitoris, it used to be said that the clitoris had way more nerve endings than the penis. And then we now know that that is not true. There is just as many nerve endings in the glands as there are in the clitoris. However, the surface area of the glands is obviously much larger than the clitoris. So where a clitoris might have more intense sensation for a woman because of the condensed surface area in which the nerve endings are dispersed, for a man, it may be a little more subdued. So men tend to like maybe a little more stimulation. You may have noticed this, guys, that when your wife or your partner touches your penis, she probably touches it too soft in the beginning. And this is something that my wife and I worked through, because typically when I would go to touch her clitoris, I would be touching it too vigorously. And that can be annoying and irritating to a woman in the beginning until they're sexually aroused. Whereas for a man, we tend to need a little firmer pressure in the beginning to actually get aroused. So that's just a generality. Now, having said that, there's a lot of variability in penis sensation, both in your own experience, time to time, and from man to man. So there are various areas of the penis that may feel really pleasurable for some guys to be stimulated, and others, it doesn't do anything for them. So, but typically where the sensation is located the most in most males is the corona, which is the ridge of the penis, as well as the meatus, which is the slit at the top where you pee and semen comes out of. And then underneath that, on the bottom side, is the frenulum, which is where the foreskin attaches underneath the penis. If you have foreskin, if it's not, it's been removed, but there's still enough tissue there that there's a particular spot, if you move your finger up and down, that can be really pleasurable. And that area probably doesn't get a lot of attention, to be honest, because I don't think a lot of men are very aware of that, because the way guys tend to masturbate is whole hand stroking up and down on, just pushing the glands up and down through their hand. And they're not really focused on, as a boy, kind of noticing all the different sensations in their body. That takes some growth and kind of more mindfulness, I think, to actually be aware of that. So that's kind of the general anatomy of the penis.
Yeah, so that's it, guys. Be kind to your frenulum. If you want a little to take away from this episode, is be kind to the frenulum, because there's all kind of ways that you can experience pleasure with penile stimulation. But I think, Scott, what is the harm of maybe masturbating consistently enough where you get accustomed to the feeling of your hand versus the feeling of another person's hand who touches your penis differently than you do, or to penetrative sex, where obviously the tension, the touch is a different dynamic. It's a more of a fullness and a warmness than a particular firmness and direct stimulation.
Yeah, well, so again, a lot of this goes back to all of the things that we're talking about in this series, is the way that we condition our body to respond to sexual touch, to arousal, and to achieving orgasm, kind of in that order. And all of these different variables that go together can create problems in development, in childhood, going into adolescence, if you plan on having partnered sex. Now, if you don't want to get married and you don't ever plan on having partnered sex, then maybe it's not that big an issue for you. But if you want to have sex with another person, and particularly vaginal sex with your wife, intercourse, you have to start to realize at a certain point that a vagina and my hand do not feel the same.
Really?
And
What?
yeah,
That's crazy, Scott.
I know I'm talking nutty stuff here, but
Talking out your ass again.
But so if you, and think of it this way. So I think I've done this calculation. I got married at 21 and I started masturbating at 12. And I probably masturbated 6 times a week, maybe on average between 21 and 12. So how many years is that? Quick, do the math. I don't know.
9 years.
9 years. Okay, so let me put my
450 times 6. So we're looking at somewhere in the 3,000 range.
So by the time I got married, I'd had 3,000 orgasms with my hand. And then I go to have sex on my wedding night and I notice something immediately. This feels completely different than my hand. Most of the time I'm gripping it pretty firmly because that's what most guys prefer. I preferred that. I like to feel the tightness around my penis and I like to feel kind of intense sensations. So stroking it a little more firmly. And then I go to have sex with my wife and it's a little subtler.
And you think?
Right. And it feels good. It's warm. It's wet. It feels, really delightful, but it's not the same sensation that I've trained my body to orgasm with. And on the wedding night, maybe not such a problem. Maybe not such a problem in the first year or two of marriage. But if you start going back to masturbation, you may start to experience a problem with arousal when you go to have sex and you notice, this isn't quite feeling as tight as I like it that I'm used to. And that can start to create some problems with erectile dysfunction. It's going to create shame because now I can't keep my erection up. My wife doesn't know I'm masturbating. And all of this kind of confusing stuff starts cropping up that I really didn't think that much about when I was a 12-year-old. Or in that period where I'm giving myself 5,000 orgasms. And now I go to having sex, even in marriage in the first couple of years. Let's say we did it 5 or 6 times a week, but that doesn't continue for years and years and years. If that's what you're expecting when you're getting married, guys, good luck with that.
Well, maybe if you married a sex addict, maybe if they need it just as much as you need it, then maybe that's a match made in heaven in the bedroom, hell outside the bedroom. But still, I mean, typically you're talking about 2, especially when you have kids, 2 to 3 times a week is a great average.
That is the national average for the amount of time couples make love in a week on an average basis. So yeah, you're going from a lot of frequency to a reduced amount of frequency, but also then the sensation is going to be different for you. So if you go back to that old habit of masturbating, all those neural pathways that were created around your masturbation habit over and over and over and over again at a very young time in your life, when your brain is very malleable and those neurons can link up and form those pathways, and then it's easy to reinforce them, they're going to be reactivated. They don't go away. So now you're back kind of dealing with, which do I like better? And, frankly, sometimes it can feel better to masturbate than to have intercourse.
We'll get to this in just a second, but I think there is a piece that's important. It feels better on my penis to masturbate. Maybe I'm more efficient. Maybe I can use my hand and get to where I want to go orgasmically in a way that feels more pleasurable. But there is a chemical difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've done my research on this, a chemical difference between the release of masturbatory orgasms and partnered orgasms.
There is in the release of dopamine and oxytocin, which means there's no bonding really occurring, because when you're masturbating, unless you're using porn or fantasy, then you would be bonding with the images there, but that's still less of a bond than a physical touch bond, because more oxytocin is released through physical touch. Now, touching your own penis releases oxytocin, but not as much as touching another person.
And I think, and we'll get to that in our next episode on this topic, but so to say that, yes, you're kind of exchanging the short-term gain for the and losing the long-term profit. You get a little bit in the short term. It's achievable. You have a sensation that's great, but it's kind of like, at 12, 13, 14, 15, even into your early 20s, there's not a lot of guys that are lamenting, I'm masturbating. There are a few maybe, and a lot of the guys that are lamenting it because of the shame of what they've been told in their religious environment or by their parents or whatever. But really practically in adulthood and in maturity, the difficulty with masturbation comes in is that I can't feel the same thing with my partner that I feel with myself.
That's right. And the other element there is if I'm masturbating by myself and I start to go soft, I don't have any shame because it's occurring with me, right? But if I start having intercourse and I start to get soft or I can't get hard, suddenly now I have to deal with the shame that my body is not responding the way a male body should. And I hear this all the time from guys is, I can get hard when I masturbate with myself, but I can't when I go to have intercourse with my wife or I start to lose my erection. And so again, that veneer of shame comes over your married, your partnered sexual experience, not because you're masturbating per se, but because you feel less sensation and it's not as stimulating as it is with yourself. And then you feel shame when you can't maintain the arousal. And that both of those factors work against you in that condition. So, Andrew Huberman has talked about masturbation as well, where he's got a great podcast on all the neuroscience on this, but he's the one that says, when you're having partnered sex, you're bonding with the other person, but when you have masturbatory sex, who is there to bond with? So there's kind of an emptiness in the cycle that's intended to create connection. And instead it's just an emptiness. And so your tendency after you get partnered with somebody and you're continuing the masturbation habits on the side or on the down low is to start to feel more lonely and to start to feel more empty after it. And so that's where the problem really comes in. It's not the masturbation itself.
But Scott, what about the guys who they've tried? They've tried to connect with their partner. They've tried to have sex. And, there's a lot of obstacles to being sexually intimate with someone. There's a lot of relational dynamics and emotional dynamics and circumstantial dynamics. And they just realized it's better off for me to masturbate. It feels better for me, the whole package, right? I understand the downsides of not connecting as deeply or there not being this ideal, but for me, in my situation, whatever it is, maybe my wife just says, you just go take care of yourself and I don't want to worry about it. And so I've trained myself, I've trained my body that this feels the best that I can feel. I'm just going to do it. And it is what it is. And I'm settled for it. It's not my ideal, but it works for me. What do you say to guys like that?
I honestly say I feel the sadness in what you're telling me, because I don't think their preference is really to masturbate. I think what they're saying is my only alternative is this because, and this is a really common problem, I have a spouse that doesn't care that much about touching my penis or that doesn't care that much about my desire. And I'm not talking about guys being hypersexual and trying to use their wife. There's something in their wife's story that makes touching their penis or engaging in sex more passionately threatening. And that's not the guy's fault necessarily, right? Just even if he's masturbating, it's not always the man's fault. Just because you struggle with the sexual addiction, that's not the fault, or what's going on in your wife's body is not necessarily the fault of your sexual addiction. It may be related. There may be some trauma related to that, but it's not the only thing. And so this is where, and again, back to the religious idea of marriage is the thing that will fix your life. It's seen culturally that way for men. Like what you need to do is you need to get a woman and get married. It's seen in the church as the reason for existence. You are supposed to get married and breed and have children. And honestly, marriage is a crucible that reveals the weakness in each of the partners. That's what it really is. And it's an invitation to generative conflict if you want to see it as that, or it's an invitation to heartache if you want to see it as that. And so this assumption that when I get married, the sex is going to flow freely. My wife is going to desire it as much as I do. She's going to know how to touch my penis, and I'm going to know how to bring her to orgasm instantly. It just isn't true. But it's a mythology that we've all bought into, and it creates a lot of disappointment and heartache. And that story, that our sexual stories, both for ourselves and our wives, need to be engaged if we're ever going to experience desire the way it's supposed to be and the way it's intended to be enjoyed.
The phrase that has been most helpful to me is marriage is not for my happiness, it's for my growth. And so what you're saying is, there's going to be heartbreak, there's going to be struggle, there's going to be hardship is necessary to push me into becoming a person that I need to be. Now, what I also hear in this, and this is what I would say to guys who ask me that same question, is, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you're willing to settle for? That's kind of the sadness that I heard you express towards a guy who's struggling with that, because there's a sense of resignation of, well, I'm me whacking one off, which is the same thing I've been doing since I was 11 or 12, is the pinnacle of my connective ability, my ability to feel sensations in my body. And I would just say, man, there's gotta be more than that. And unfortunately, and for me, this is kind of where this conversation leads to. I mean, what would it be like if you stopped touching your penis for a season? Hear me clearly, for a season. And we see a lot of this with guys, and there's a lot of, I don't want to say helpful advice, because a lot of it's mixed with a bunch of toxicity and performance, but there is some science behind having a season of not masturbating to get some clarity emotionally. True?
Yeah, and some dopamine reset in your brain, because you've been pulling on that joystick and it's creating an artificially high level of dopamine, particularly in regards to regulating your emotions. And if the only way you know to soothe yourself or to make yourself feel alive when you're feeling kind of dead inside is to grab your penis, that's going to create a problem of reinforcing those negative emotional states to go to get the orgasm. And suddenly now I don't know how to do life without having an orgasm. And my main method of getting that is to masturbate. And I like what you said with one revision, that the purpose of marriage is not to be happy. I'm reading this book by Arthur Brooks called Build the Life You Want. It's on the art and science of happiness. But here's the thing that he says that I think is really important in there is, it's not possible to really be happy in life, in the sense of there's not a place called happy that when I arrive at that place, I will be eternally happy.
It's called contentment. It's called peace.
And
yeah.
Yes. So what is possible is I can be happier. But even in the midst of being happier, I'm still going to have unpleasant, painful emotions from time to time. I'm still going to be angry. I'm still going to be sad. I'm still going to feel shame. I'm still going to be afraid at times. And instead of retreating off by myself and masturbating to deal with those, what if I could bring those to my partner and we could actually engage in our emotions together? That's what creates intimacy, and that's what creates a better sex life.
And that right there, Scott, is, I think, when I'm willing to give up my plaything, my joystick for a season. And guys, what I found out is the season becomes something. It becomes a tool. There may be times in your life where it's just, hey, I'm not feeling emotionally connected. Am I distracting myself with masturbation? Am I using my internal hormone releases to be not present with myself and with my partner and not
present because I emotionally can't deal with what's going on in our relationship.
Correct. So over time, and that's what we mean by doing your work. Part of doing your work is getting vulnerable, curious about your story, connecting with other guys who can help you regulate your emotions, learning how to give up your survival strategies, your coping behaviors, gradually over time. So you get to the place where then you can say in your body, in your heart, in your mind, what it is that you really want. Desire is the through line of all of this. when you touch your penis at 12, what you really want is somebody to see you and touch you compassionately and comfort you, but they're not there. So you substitute masturbation and the sensation of stroking one out for that love and connection and attunement.
And then when you get married and you have all this hope that that person is going to bring me those things that were always lacking in my life, viewed through a sexual lens, and you find out they're not all that interested in that, what are you going to do with all that disappointment? The tendency is to go back to the thing that brought me a lot of life. In this case, stroking my own penis really firmly, generating a lot of intense sensation for me, because I just don't know how to deal with the heartache of being in a relationship where I don't feel seen again. And so much of the sensation that we're talking about isn't just in the penis, it's all in my body. It's all about how I feel being seen, being pursued, being welcomed, being invited into delight, or having all of that pushed aside. And, you know, there are heartbreaking stories of really good friends of mine who, you know, they may have been sexually abused by by an adult who masturbated them as little boys. And so that in that moment, because of the lack of care in their family, they came alive because this older guy was paying attention to them, especially in a very pleasurable part of their body to touch. And their father completely ignored them, never hugged them, never even looked at him when he talked. And yet this man loved his penis and gave him pleasure in his penis. And so this creates a problem in his young life. And he acts out with other boys and he does all this stuff growing up. And then he meets a woman and he falls in love. And as he pursues his relationship with her in marriage, she will not touch his penis. And what does that do? It breaks his heart. And then there's not the space in the relationship to even have a conversation. Could we talk about why when we go to make love, I have to get myself hard. You won't touch my penis. You don't even, like, it doesn't seem like you want me to do anything other than just put it in and give you an orgasm. I'm curious about what's going on in you there.
And that conversation only comes when a man is willing to be kind to himself and understand why he wants his penis touched the way he does. And that it's a journey. It's a process to get there, because you don't wake up overnight and just explain these things. It's all wrapped up in our stories. It's all wrapped up in the context of it. And I'll say one more thing, Scott, that I think is really significant in this, which is when I begin to be aware of what I really want, then I can begin to do what you just did, which is have a conversation with my wife, with my partner, about what I really want and invite her to see me, to attune to me, and to touch my penis in a way that feels comforting.
Without using shame or anger to get her to do it.
That is correct.
Right? But you have to do that work on yourself and know what it is to give kindness to yourself in your body, in that, to be able to go to your partner and say, hey, I've been thinking about something, and this is going to be a difficult conversation probably for you, but I'm doing this because I want something more for both of us. And that is, I've noticed that, like, you don't even touch my penis. You don't look at it. You don't say anything about how you like it or anything. And it makes me feel very unseen in our relationship. Like, I'm just to service you. And I'm just curious, what's been going on in you when we make love? Like, where is this coming from? Either am I doing something, or is there something in your past that's kind of haunting you and intruding into the current moment with us? And it's an invitation rather than a demand. But see, our tendency is, when we're feeling unseen, is to go, damn it, I want what's coming to me. I mean, I see what 1 Corinthians 7 says. You're supposed to do your duty to me.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to get anybody to want to make love to you by asking them to demand they do their duty.
Have you ever seen the reel that's been going around where a mother's talking to her daughter and says, you just stick it in your mouth and swallow it. Come on. You just have to do it. And her husband starts cracking up going, and she looks at him like, shut up, you know, because that's the implication, right?
Yeah, that's going to make her want to perform oral sex on you.
Not
right?
at all. Not at all. It's vulnerability and modeling emotional attunement that's really going to invite that. So however you like to touch it or have it be touched, this conversation can go a bunch of different directions. But one of the things we want to continue to do is connect with you and reach out to you. You can do that in a number of different ways. Be a part of our lives on Fridays at 11 a.m. Central. Reach out to us and support us here on YouTube with subscriptions or likes. And also come to one of our retreats. We got a bunch of things on the calendar. Go to wegotballspod.com. You can go there and connect. But most importantly, Scott, what's the most important way if people really want to connect with us? What can they do?
So they can get in a group or get involved in coaching and weekly group by going to our website, successfulmen.com, booking an appointment with Chris or me just to kind of consult and then find out if what we're offering is the right solution for where you are on your journey, to kind of find out how to be your best self, how to enjoy your sexuality, how to flourish, how to really enjoy your relationships as well. And so we invite you guys to check us out there. And
you can do that at successfulmen.com. That's where we are. You'll find us there. You'll connect with us there and a bunch of other guys just like you. So until we come back for the final episode of Science of Masturbation,
for the grand climax of the Science of Masturbation,
we're going to connect it all together, Scott, because that's what we do.
Explosive.
That's what we do right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too.
Take care, guys.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris and with Scott at successfulmen.com.